Mr. President, this is a lead debate on the deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contract cap, D3 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2019. My request is sharing of the lead debate cap 103 D3 LFN 2004 Amendment Bill 2019. The first reading of this bill took place on October 3, 2019. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, this bill seeks to amend the deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contract cap D3 laws of Federation of Nigeria 2004 PSC Act. Specifically, the bill seeks to amend Section 5 of the PSC Act to bring the provision of that section into conformity with the generality of the provisions of the Act and into congruence with the intent and the essence of the production sharing contracts. Mr. President, my distinguished and resident colleagues, as you are well aware, the PSC is a contractual arrangement for exploration and production of petroleum resources. This is an arrangement whereby the state, as owner of the petroleum resources, engages a contractor to undertake all the financial responsibilities, all the risk, while providing the technical and financial services for the exploration and production of operations for an agreed share in profit oil after payment of royalty, costs, and tax oil. The PSC arrangement was offered by the federal government of Nigeria as a contractual arrangement for the exploration and production of petroleum products in 1991 licensing rounds in order to provide further comfort to the contractors, which is the IOCs. The salient terms of the PSC was codified into a legislation, namely the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contracts Act, cap D3 LFN 2004, which became effective on January 1, 1993. Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, as enunciated by its long title, the PSC Act was enacted to, among other things, give effect to certain fiscal incentives given to the oil and gas companies operating in a deep offshore and inland basin area under production sharing contracts. The Act sought to deliver this fiscal incentive by providing for A, longer duration of oil prospecting licenses, B, reduction in petroleum profit tax, C, investment tax credits or investment tax allowance, and D, a distinctively lower royalty regime based on water depth, which requires that a contractor carrying out petroleum operations in areas from 201 to 500 meters water depth shall pay royalty at 12%. 500 to 800 meters water depth shall pay royalty of 8%. 801 to 1,000 water depth shall pay royalty of 4%, and 0% in areas in excess or beyond 1,000 meters depth, which is where most of the deep offshore exploration activities under this PSC takes place. All of these fiscal incentives are distinct and absent from the provisions of the Petroleum Act and the Petroleum Profit Tax Act, which regulates the fiscal regime of other types of petroleum exploration and production arrangements. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, permit me to state that the above fiscal incentives were given by the federal government of Nigeria in order to A, attract oil and gas companies to the Nigerian deep offshore, B, de-risk the Nigerian deep offshore, which was a new business for oil and gas companies. C, create environment for deployment of new deep offshore technologies. D, allow for rapid cost recovery. And E, assure bankability because the prevailing oil prices was very low, hovering around $13 per barrel when the act was enacted. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, further permit me to state that a cursory reading and literal interpretation of the generality of the provision of the PSC Act shows that at the time of execution of the contract and the enactment of the Act, all parties to the PSC understood that the incentive extended by the Act were excessive, but were necessary to achieve the objective stated above. However, all parties to the PSC also understood that the incentives were to all intents and purposes supposed to be ad hoc, improvisational, contingent, and therefore amenable. This is the reason why the Act provided in Section 16 that where the price of crude oil exceeds $20 per barrel, the PSC Act will be reviewed to ensure that the share of federal government of Nigeria in the additional revenue is adjusted to the extent that the PSC shall be economically beneficial to the federal government of Nigeria, and that in any event, the PSC Act shall be liable to be reviewed after 15 years from its commencement in 1993, and every 5 years thereafter. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, the PSC Act recognizes and anticipates the necessity for post-execution and periodic review of the Act once the above objectives have been attained in order to ensure that the government derives maximum and equitable benefits from the PSCs, and to which set out the following review incidents and deadlines in the Act. A, price-induced review of the provision of the PSC Act. That is a review to be undertaken whenever the price of crude oil exceeds $20 per barrel, real terms, in order to increase revenue attributable to the government of the Federation from the PSCs. B, the review of the entire provision of the PSC Act, including sharing formula provisions contained in the Act, 15 years after the commencement of the Act in 1993. And C, review of the entire provision of the PSC Act every 5 years thereafter. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, the extant Act, however, did not provide any mechanism or sanction for the implementation or otherwise of the provisions regarding the statutory periodic review in Section 16. To this end, a new Section 17 and Section 18 have placed responsibility and subsequent consequences for non-compliance with Section 16. It is noteworthy that the Act has achieved the objective of the federal government of Nigeria with respect to which the excessive incentives were given to the PSC contractors. In addition, the watermark for periodic review of the salient provision of the Act, which include increase in oil price above $20 in real terms and 15 years after the commencement of the Act, have already been surpassed. Mr. President, my distinguished and respected colleagues, this bill before the distinguished Senate contains the amendment of salient provisions of PSC Act, which are Section 5 and Section 16 of the Act. This amendment alters the royalty payable by the PSC contractors so that whenever oil price and gas price increases, the share of government increases with the automatic inception of the newly introduced royalty by price mechanism. The bill provides that whenever oil price goes above $35 per barrel, real term, the royalty by price shall kick in for each of the terrains. The royalty regime proposed by this bill for oil and condensate are as follows. A, from $0 per barrel up to $36 per barrel will be 0% royalty. Above $36 per barrel but up to $70 per barrel will be 2% per dollar increase royalty. Above $70 per barrel up to $100 per barrel will be 8% royalty plus 0.2% per dollar increase. Above $100 per barrel and up to $190 per barrel will be 20% royalty plus 0.1% per dollar increase. And above $190 per barrel will be 25% royalty. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this is because as oil price increases, costs also increases. The royalty regime proposed by the bill for natural gas are as follows. 0% for prices from $0 per million British thermal unit BTU and up to and including $2 per million BTU. Over $2 per million BTU and up to and including $6 per million BTU, the royalty rate shall increase by 0.3% for every US dollar 0.1 per million BTU increases in over $2 per million BTU. Over US dollars, $6. My distinguished and respected colleagues, this long-awaited amendment of the PSC Act is in accord with the intent of the Principal Act. It provides for a review of the selling provisions of the Act to ensure that the share of federal government of Nigeria in the additional revenue is adjusted to the extent that the PSC shall be economically viable to the federal government. In doing this amendment, we have retained the generality of the fiscal incentive afforded the PSC companies. This is to ensure that Nigeria will retain its competitiveness while remaining a first-rate destination for deep water investments. Mr. President,
my name is Stella Adeze Odua and I represent Anambra North. Mr. President, I stand to support this very crucial bill. Mr. President, clearly to fund our budget, we need to improve on our sources of revenue, and this happens to be a very pivotal part of that revenue source. Mr. President, as much as I support this bill, I just have two observations, and I'm sure the mover of this bill will explain that. We all know that clearly the reason why we have this hurdle in revenue coming from PSC is because there has not been penalty clause for non-compliance to these contractual agreements, contractual obligation by the oil companies. And going through this presentation, I haven't seen the penalty clause for non-compliance as well. So I think it's important that it increases from what it is now to what it's on the bill. The second observation I have, is there? Okay. The second one I have is again an observation. The increase to $35 per barrel. I want to know, why are we pegging it on $35 per barrel? I think we should stick to just about 30% increase from the $20 to what it is now, as opposed to giving them $35 per barrel. And then when he talks about what accrues to us in terms of revenue from when the price benchmark increases, and we're getting 0 when it's 36, and we're getting 2%. My observation is that this is very, very minimal, and that we should increase it to at least 30%. And if it is 2%, is it the global best practice in PSC contracts? using Angola and other places where we have similar templates. Mr. President, these are my observations. The same thing to the gas. I think if we do not increase what we have here, really we won't deter them from flaring gas. And the environmental degradation is on the increase. I think we need to do something that will make it very uneconomical for them to flare gas. Thank you, Mr. President.
I want to Ibrahim Hassan Hadeja, Jigawa North East. What I have to add is something similar to what Senator Stella Odua mentioned. There is a penalty clause in the proposed amendment, section 18, I believe. But I think, Mr. President, I would like to call for us to have another look at this clause because it appears too lenient. If we are talking about losses in excess of almost $6 billion, and the fact that non-compliance with the original bill was because there was no penalty, then certainly 1 year imprisonment and 50 million naira fine, which is less than $140,000, I think should be looked at. We're talking about an industry that deals in dollars. And Mr. President, for this amount, non-compliance, all companies might actually be tempted to start putting aside this penalty even before they start their financial year. So I think we should look at it. Maybe increase this from 50 million to the equivalent of $1 million so that we really know that there's something in place that will ensure that this new amendment is complied with. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I represent Abia Central. I stand to support the entirety of this bill because of its importance. Because if this bill scales through, we'll not be looking for money to fund our budget. A lot of money there. But I want to place on record that this bill that is before us was the first bill I brought up in the 8th Senate. I brought it up here as a baby senator, just like Rocha Sokorocha is a baby senator today. Now, the bill passed first reading, passed second reading, and went to the committee stage. And naturally, it didn't come out from there. We made all efforts for that bill to come out and proceed. It didn't see the light of the day. I am happy that Akpan has brought up this bill, the chairman of the committee. And I know the interest you, Mr. Chairman, has shown in this bill. I want you to keep that interest so that this bill will see the light of the day and pass through all the processes and to be enacted into a law so that we, at least, can heave a sigh of relief from this funding that we cry every day. In fact, that is the only contribution I have to make. Thank you.
I am Senator Barrow Jibrin, representing Kano North. Mr. President, I stand to support this bill in its entirety. It's a bill that should have been sponsored by all the senators in this chamber. Because the principal act, the loophole that was or is in the principal act that was capitalized upon made the Federation of Nigeria to lose money that some people have calculated to be up to $20 billion. We have been so shortchanged, and will have gotten money, a close amount of money that will help to develop this country. But the principal act, the loophole there, allowed the IOCs to capitalize on that loophole to take this money away from us. Now, this bill wants to fix that problem, wants to close that loophole. So it's something that all of us should embrace, the totality of the people of this country, not only senators, because it affects the entire federation. In the Leave debate, it stated that is something that affects the federal government alone. No. It affects the entire Federation of Nigeria because the money that has been lost is money that is supposed to go to the Federation of Nigeria, which includes, of course, the local government, the state government, and then the federal government. And this bill tends to maintain the incentives that are supposed to be enjoyed by the investors in deep water exploration and exploitation of our oil. So the incentives still remain, but then emphasizing that money that are supposed to come to us should come to us. Therefore, allowing our country to be a very good destination for those involved in the investment of deep water oil. So it's something that is good, it's something that should be supported, and we should also look, when the bill is referred to the committee, we should make sure that there's no loophole that will later be capitalized upon to cheat our country in the future. Let's look, let's check everywhere to make sure that we don't create any loophole that will be capitalized by anybody. And again, we should also try to make sure that whoever is found to have not done his part of duty in making sure that Nigeria is not cheated will be brought to justice. And what we are seeing now is that those who are given the responsibility of making sure that we are not shortchanged allow themselves, they stay without making sure that they did their job properly, and we are so shortchanged. So we should make sure that whoever, I think in the bill we should put it there, that any officer of the government who did not do his own part of, failed to perform his duty and allows Nigeria to be shortchanged should be punished. We should not allow a situation where those who are employed to defend the interests of the country will collude or connive with IOCs to cheat Nigeria. I so submit.
Of the contract that was entered into, the PID contract, where they are now charging us for about £9 billion or dollars to be paid. That is a previous contract. So I don't think we should here just pass this bill and not ask them to pay, because this is not retrospective legislation. The important thing is that these are monies that have accrued to us that they either neglected, refused, ignored, or deliberately want to change us over. So I think the Senate should take serious note of that. Even if we cannot recover 100%, whatever is due the federal government, Senate should take steps to ensure that as we pass this bill, what is accrued us since 1993, when the price of crude oil rose above the $20, steps should be taken for us to get some part of it. Because it's also going to help us. We should not be only the ones that will pay for our past deals, they should also pay for their past deals. On that note, I commit my colleagues that we should please pass this bill expeditiously and give it the teeth it requires for it to bite effectively. The other area I want to talk about is the penalty clause. I align myself with my distinguished Senator Adeja that the amount is too paltry, because the other companies, 50 million naira is just, that is what they can give to some very good friends in the industry. So I will suggest that we make it heavy enough so that it will be a deterrent, because the essence of any punishment is to deter the offender. So, and if the amount is too small, they will be encouraged to commit the offense and pay the fine, because what they will gain in terms of not paying the royalty that is due us will be less, will be more than what they will pay in terms of the punishment. So I will suggest, when we come to the prayers or amendments, I will suggest we get a higher penalty of between 5 years and $10 million as punishment. I so second. Thank you.
I represent Ogun Central. Mr. President, let me join my colleagues in supporting this amendment of this, what I call all-important bill. And in saying this, Mr. President, I think this is not the only bill. Bills like this, we should all come together and quickly do the necessary amendments that is required. Mr. President, just earlier today, and even in several of our sittings, we all talked about the inadequacy of our revenue as a nation. We are talking about probably today, we'll see the budget, which is about 10 point something trillion. Of course, the revenue that we envisioned is about maybe 8. Clearly, there's a gap. And that is why we have this deficit budget that we have to go a borrowing. But in a scenario where we have funds that are just being used by others that ordinarily, they know that when they operate in other clients, they don't get to do what they are doing with us here. Clearly, they've taken us for granted because they realize that we are not. Because this bill should have been amended since. And when I listened to what Senator Oji said, he said sometime in the past, this same bill was brought for amendment, and somehow the thing got killed at the committee level. But this one, I'm happy that all of us are determined that this must see the light of the day. In a scenario where we are complaining that our revenue is low or is inadequate to fund all our projects, all our desires as a nation, and we have about maybe 200 billion sitting somewhere. Indeed, when you look back, you will discover that this will have run into trillions of naira. So I think anything that we need to do to jack up our revenue without unnecessarily inconveniencing or maybe being seen that we are just bringing punitive measures because we want to just raise our revenue should be supported. Looking at this bill, and I'm waiting, I'm sure that when we come to clause by clause, there are certain things that I want to talk about, which some of my colleagues have actually spoken about. We are going to talk about the percentages. We are going to talk about penalty clause, which I think without it, of course, people will still continue to do what they are doing. So, Mr. President, I want to enjoin my colleagues that we should, particularly in the spirit of all that we are doing now. For me, I've said it severally that, yes, we have things like this that is still pending that we must address, but that the ultimate will be to diversify our economy and move away from this monolithic economy that we currently operate and we currently, all of us, rely on. This is now the time for us to be moving away from just maybe oil-related revenue. But having said that, Mr. President, if we know we have, these are low-hanging fruits. These are things that we should quickly just put in the basket, and we will all be the benefits, or we will all reap the benefits of doing this. It is not just about the federal government, just like what I've been said. This will go into federation account, and everybody will benefit. So, Mr. President, let me commend us for looking at this bill, for this amendment that we sought to do. We should quickly do it so that at least we will increase our revenue base. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I rise to support this bill. I'd like to begin, Mr. President, by commending Senator Akpan for a terrific job. Well done. Mr. President, listening to the lead debate, it's very, very clear that the condition precedent that would necessitate the amendment to the extant law has been met. It's been made very, very clear from the outset that it's either $20 per barrel or 15 years from 1993. Both of those thresholds have been met. Therefore, I commend Senator Akpan for coming forward with this amendment. Mr. President, the challenge I have, indeed a concern that I have, is that the Extant Act provides that whenever there's an increase over $20 per barrel, the federal government is entitled to an increase in its own share of the transaction. But looking at the proposed amendment, I'm seeing here that that threshold is being raised to $36 per barrel. That is my understanding. If I am wrong, I need to be educated why that threshold is being raised. The argument we've been making, and in fact an argument that led the 3 states of Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, and Rivers, I believe, to approach the Supreme Court. It's on the predicate that that $20 was sacrosanct, and they've moved past it. So now that we've had a chance to recoup from these IOCs, why give them this leeway now by increasing this threshold to to $36 per barrel? They can't go to court because the law is very, very clear. It is either $20 or 15 years from 1993. They signed up to that contract. And like I said, Mr. President, the threshold has been satisfied. So we need to be educated, sir. Why is it that we are not being asked to be given additional revenue, we being the federal government, be given additional revenue whenever it hits $20 per barrel as opposed to the $36 per barrel? Mr. President, in the absence of this, and take into account the fact that we need the proceeds that will flow from the passage of this amendment to assist in the funding of the 2020 appropriation bill or act when passed, I will support that this bill be passed expeditiously. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Colleagues, I support this bill completely, and I believe that it is better to be late than never. For having said this, Mr. President, we must also remind ourselves of the negligence on our parts in not reviewing this profit-sharing formula. We must put things in proper perspective. We have a law that says that the profit sharing in oil and gas should be reviewed within 15 years and 5 years thereafter, every 5 years thereafter. And some people were given the responsibility to manage our oil and gas business, and part of their business or their responsibility is also to make this review as provided for in the enabling law. Regrettably, due to negligence or outright refusal, this was never reviewed. We must therefore, as a Senate, condemn those who were responsible for not reviewing this instead of even blaming the oil and gas companies. I believe that they were unfair to Nigerians and they must hide their faces in shame, including those who collaborated with them to ensure that those reviews never took place. I believe they compromised themselves to the detriment of our country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I do believe that, yes, we are dealing with this. There are a number of other areas in which our officials and public servants are also cheating Nigerians in a number of ways. And it is time for us to find ways of plugging these holes. I believe that we're all aware of the import duty waiver that has been going on in this country for many years. This too has been abused, and we need to do something about it. The forest allocation regime also has been a way in which the government is shortchanged in several ways. Today, we have all kinds of charges in the banks. We have all kinds of penalties. Government is making provisions for cashless regime, and then laws and all kinds of penalties are being imposed on Nigerians who go to banks to do business. Now, unfortunately, it's only the bank that benefits from these penalties. The government is not benefiting in any way whatsoever. And I think that it is time for us to review these things to make sure that government benefits from all these resources, so that instead of taxing people unreasonably and trying to raise tax, all we need to do is to find a way of plugging some of these areas to ensure that some irresponsible civil servants and public servants do not take advantage of discretion given to them by our laws in order to cheat our country. If we do this, some of the taxes we are imposing on our people may not be relevant because we are going to raise sufficient funds in order to run our budget and run our country. So I think that either the Committee on Finance needs to look into this, or we can now collaborate with the research agency sections of this National Assembly, including National Institute of Legislative Studies, to be able to identify these areas where people are abusing their discretions, which they are supposed to be doing on behalf of our country, to ensure that the proper things are done and they'll be able to get enough revenue in order to run our country.
So I commend those who have started this process, and I believe that we should not stop only with this profit sharing in the oil and gas sector. We need to move into other areas and ensure that all those abuses are stopped to the benefit of our country. Thank you.
Permit me, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, to align myself with previous speakers and to commend the mover of this lead debate for a job well done. And from the provision of the Act being amended, it is very obvious that 2008 should have been the first review after 15 years. And of course, the next 5 years should have been 2013, second review, and the third review, 2018. Unfortunately, all these are missed opportunities. However, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the point I would like to make here is to draw our attention on the need for this Senate, beyond the expeditious passage of this bill, to really request the various committees, like we have said earlier, to look at bills that require this kind of reviews. That is the first one. Secondly, I think the former Deputy Senate President alluded to the fact that the service, the employees of the federal government that are being saddled with responsibility to look at some of these things are not doing their job well. That is true. But I think, speaking from experience, as somebody who has passed through the public service, there is a deficiency. And that deficiency is to the effect that when you see a desk officer who is being given a responsibility to look at something, the desk officer might do his work, but the power that be that are on top might decide otherwise. So how do we solve this problem? My take here is that there is need for us to look at the service itself and to see how we can begin to pin certain critical responsibilities to certain people in a manner that when they default, there is consequence for defaulting. Because the issue is that there is no consequence for defaulting, and that is why everybody is doing whatever he likes, or he or she likes. And I think that is not good for our country. Right now, the country needs every available income or revenue so that we'll be able to meet all the needs that this country requires. With these few comments, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I urge my colleagues to support this, and subsequently for us to do the needful so that we can just learn from the lessons of these missed opportunities we've had and correct whatever ills that there are in the various bills that or acts that we have.
My distinguished colleagues, Aisha Tudairu Ahmed Binani, representing Adama Central. Mr. President, I would like to align myself with Senator Stella Adazi on the issue of this increasing the benchmark of the fine from 50 million to, let's say, to a very, very high figure, maybe probably in dollars, because that's the only way that will not make them to commit this offense. If the fine is low, they will rather commit the offense and opt for paying for the fine. So I think we should consider a figure not less than $50 million so that they can really, really sit up. Secondly, I would like to align myself with the DSP that was asking why should the threshold increase, knowing fully that the PSC, the PSC law, the PSC Act came about through a decree number 9 of the 1999, which was actually an amendment of the 1969 Petroleum Act and Petroleum Profit Tax. It stated clearly $20. If the crude oil exceeds $20 per barrel, then they should it calls for review so that to ensure that the government gets maximum equitable profit. So we should not increase that. We shouldn't raise it that to either 35 or 36. We have to maintain that 20 so that it can even give us strong hold to recover our lost revenue. If we're increasing it, then we are only inviting trouble. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, in as much as we are looking at our revenue from our own side, we equally have to look at the IOC's side. We have to consider that the fact that the priority of the PSC, that's production sharing contract, given to is becoming so pronounced in Nigeria, and because of the nature of oil and gas business in this country, making it very, very unattractive for commercial lenders to accept to finance such projects, because any project that is associated with exploration, especially oil, the risk is very, very high. So we really have to take that into consideration. And even when they accept to lend, it always comes with a very, very high interest. I'm saying this, Mr. President, because of, if you look at the Gazette, there is a clause that we are even advocating that the rate applicable should be 25. And I think this is not in alignment with the international best practice, because if you look at the major oil producing countries like Russia, charges approximately $11, and then Brazil charges between $10 to $15, while Saudi Arabia charges in accordance with the stipulation of each contract. If you look at Argentina, they charges 12% on the well-held value, that is as exploration is going on. If you look at Ecuador, they charges between 12.5% to 18.5% depending. And then if you look at Kuwait, it charges 15%, while China charges between 5 to 10% on the selling price. Mr. President, if you look at India, charges 12% on the onshore production, while 10% on shallow water offshore production, and also 5% on deep water offshore production. So, and all these for a period of 7 years, and after that, they now convert to 10%. All this is in relation.
You can round up.
Come what may, we shouldn't exceed that 20%. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there anybody join my colleagues in congratulating the sponsors of this bill? But of course, all of us here agreed that we need to pass the amendment. But like many of our colleagues here said, jacking up from $20 to $35 is totally unnecessary. We are already losing $7.5 per barrel. Because if we were to get 50% of whatever accrues when it is over $20 per barrel, it means we are consciously inviting loss of revenue. So I believe that we should stick with the $20. And I also think that the percentages, the report on page 5, the lead debate, the percentages are low. While we are not going to make it difficult for the investors, we should actually benefit properly as a country. So I want to urge this, whichever committee, especially the Upstream committee, to look into this. Definitely we have to stick with our $20 per barrel. We can't go that 5 consciously losing revenues. We can't do that. We are looking for revenues. So we don't think, majority of us here don't think we should take it up to that 5. And I also agree with most of the submissions about the penalties. Penalties are meant to be deterrents. So I think we need to make the suggested penalties a little bit stiffer so that it is not attractive for people to commit those things that we feel they must not. With these brief remarks, let me put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk.
Mr. President.
A bill for an act to amend the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Sharing Contract Cap D3 laws of the Federation of Nigeria Act 2004 and for other matters connected thereto 2019 second reading taken. The bill is referred to the committees on petroleum resources upstream and gas resources because gas is also involved. And the lead committee is petroleum upstream. The authority to interpret the rules inside. And I'm relying on Order 25H to allow the Senate leader to move a motion. So with that, I want to put the question now. Those in favor of the motion that the Committee on Finance joins and that the Committee on Senate Upstream, Petroleum Upstream, is the leading committee, say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So you have between today, Monday, you report to the Senate on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, we will receive and consider. Because that Tuesday, Senate will suspend its plenary for the budget defense activities. So we expect our committees, the joint committee here, to engage whoever has something to present. But the message from this chamber at the moment is 35 is not tenable. We stick with our $20 per barrel as the benchmark. And you also look at the penalties you have suggested in the bill. Thank you very much.